Hi everyone, I just wanted to give you a quick content warning that today's case is gruesome and horrifying. It does involve two little boys under the age of 5 that were in care and then adopted. The biological family contests that the children were moved illegally, and there's a lot that goes into this case. So I did want to just give you that forewarning before we begin. If that's going to be too hard for you, please just skip this video and catch me on the next one. Here we go. Remember, if I do appear to be looking off to the side, it's because I do script all of these out myself. I work really hard on all of this and the research. Although I do have someone coming on who may be helping me with research soon, as of right now, this is all my own individualized research. Here we go. When we see deaths and murders within the foster care and adoptive world, it is so easy to point fingers every which way, and it is important to remember that often these children do in fact have families that love and want these children, and some criterion for removal do appear to be racially and culturally motivated. However, in this case, that was not why these children were removed. In the case of 4-year-old classic Pettus and 3-year-old Cinsere Pettus, the biological family of the two young boys have come forward saying that not only were the boys murdered while in care, but they were unlawfully removed from the family's care to begin with. The mother has already filed a federal lawsuit to these points. It will be interesting to see how this pans out for her, but she is sincere enough to take legal action on a federal level, and that speaks not only to her education and understanding of the law, but also her love and dedication for her baby boys, even after their horrible death in care. This comes back to the point that we need federal regulation on child removals and placements within the system, as the system is repeatedly failing the American children in its care every single day. 4-year-old classic Pettus and 3-year-old Cinsere Pettus were reported missing from their family's backyard in the desert town of California City on December 21st of 2020. The boys were black and have not been found, and the Kern County prosecutor said in March that the investigation did determine that they were deceased. According to CBSNews.com, the foster parents, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, have pled not guilty to multiple charges, including 2 counts of second-degree murder. Their criminal trial is scheduled to begin soon. I do want to point out as well that there is some discrepancy. Some people believe that this was a foster placement. However, they have come out saying that they did indeed adopt these children and subsequently changed their names. For this video, I will be referring to them as Classic and Cinsere. Because of everything listed here, I do think it is more honorable to honor the biological family that was doing everything within its power to protect these boys than to honor the family that legally signed them into their family and then subsequently unalived them. The biological mother, Ryan Dean, who will be referred to as Dean for most of this video, and her mother, Dana Moorer, have filed a federal wrongful death suit naming not only the obviously incompetent and horrible foster parents, but also the Kern County Human Services and California Department of Social Services as at fault for the death of these two beautiful baby boys. The problems that I see in this suit do include a few key pieces of information. One being that they accuse the foster home of being a state-created danger that resulted in the death of 2 children. I don't know how they're going to prove that in court. Outside of the fact that this family was a foster family, they were fostered to adopt, meaning while they did have social workers and had to go through the foster care training, typically, foster to adopt homes are working with agencies and not directly working with CPS. And the second part that I find interesting is that this family is seeking $40 million in restitution. While I completely understand the family's frustrations in this case, I cannot fathom what I might do in their shoes. I also fail to see how going for money would be more beneficial than asking for change within the process of removal. However, I also know that both of these sweet boys do fall into the adoptable range, 0 to 2, and the adoption industry is a $20.5 billion industry. So, if they were working with an agency, it may make sense that adoption was pushed prematurely. I can see asking for that much if it is going to be used lobbying and enacting change to the system, which did cause this family so much pain. Unfortunately, at this time, we do not have all of the information on that. So much about the intent of this massive number is truly unknown and very unclear. It is known that the older child was removed due to injuries, and the younger child was removed at birth to keep the children together. But all kinship placements, including the grandmother, were never really exhausted nor looked into, despite multiple attempts and repeated efforts by the grandmother. The grandmother went through so much trying to create a safe and loving home for these babies. And unfortunately, that wasn't looked at, even though she was repeatedly petitioning, doing psych evaluations, going through the foster care training, etc., etc., etc. That was not being looked at by CPS. And it is unclear if that is because they were placed into a foster adopt home and CPS already had assigned an adoption social worker to them, in which case the battle would have been severely uphill and very hard to win. Kern County Human Services Information Officer Jana Slagle and the department said that the department was unable to comment on the lawsuit because of a court's gag order. The state agency said in an email that it is unable to comment on litigation. The older child was taken from his biological parents after he was hospitalized in 2016. According to the suit, Dean had returned from work to find the 3-month-old crying uncontrollably, and when she brought him to the emergency room, it was determined he had 2 broken legs, the court filing said. The biological father, Charles Pettus, had been home with the son all day, and he said that he had given his son 2 baths, but nothing important had happened that would have broken the legs. Due to there not being a report of any incident that would result in 2 legs being broken, the hospital staff members informed Dean that the Kern County Human Services would be taking her child because they believed he had been abused. Now remember, this baby's only 3 months old. Dean had no criminal record and no allegations of abuse against her when the child was removed from her care. It does make sense if she was living with an abusive partner that she may have said, okay, let me get my shit together and get this baby, get out of this situation and get my babies back. And that seems to be what she did with the first placement. After Dean gave birth to her second son in June of 2017, a sheriff's deputy took him away because human service officials said they like to keep siblings together. Because there was already an open case, they were able to essentially just come in and take the baby and then place the baby in that original foster home. After spending months with one foster family, the boys were placed with the Wests in late 2018. At this point, Dean said she started noticing that her children were losing weight and that the younger boy had scratches on his face. More information will come about that, but I do want to say that this mother stayed in constant contact with her babies. She was doing everything within her power to get them back, and she was visiting them weekly and sometimes multiple times a week, and having all of the court-ordered visitation that she could and then some with the first foster home. With the second foster home, she was only allowed the court-ordered visitation, and she started to notice these concerns. In November of 2018, Miss Dean wrote a letter expressing her concerns about the lack of proper care for her children that her children were receiving while in the foster care of the Wests. No one ever provided a response to this letter. She also did report during her visits to the CPS that there were concerns, and CPS chose not to investigate further. After CPS chose not to investigate, Dean's mother also filed a request to have the children placed in her care, which was again ignored. McCoy said that Moore was also completing parenting classes and a psychological review in an attempt to get her grandsons, but was denied. The foster parents then renamed the little boys with new first and their last names, 4-year-old Orion and 3-year-old Orson West, but the family's lawsuit does not acknowledge these names and instead refers to them as their birth names, Classic and Cinsere Pettus. And in my opinion, this does seem to be a better fit, given the repeated pleas, actions, and attempts for reunification and custody from the biological family, especially their grandmother. So for this video, I will be referring to them as Classic and Cinsere out of respect, if not for the mother and father, then for the grandmother who tried so hard to get these precious baby boys. In this case, the boys were determined dead 3 months before the children were ever reported missing, and none of the facts in this case will be revealed about the criminal case until it goes to trial. In this case, the foster parents were later able to adopt despite multiple attempts from the family for reunification. The children were adopted despite protests and all the correct actions from the biological grandparent and mother. Neither of the boys' bodies have ever been recovered. Dean has been battling for custody since November of 2016. Guys, it's been so hard to breathe lately. When her oldest child was taken to the hospital for x-rays and found that he had broken both of his legs. Because no major incident was reported to cause the broken legs, the hospital suspected abuse and the child was removed from her care. In the child's first foster home, Dean was able to and did visit weekly, completed all of her parenting courses that were required, and had filed the paperwork for reunification. No allegations of abuse, neglect, or harm were reported during this time against Dean or the foster parent. And it is to be noted that this first foster parent is not noted or mentioned in the lawsuit, given that she was an actual good foster parent trying to do her best and was all set for this reunification to happen. At this time, reunification seemed to be on the horizon. In June of 2016, Dean gave birth to her second son, and no maltreatment or other incidents were reported. And while premature, the child was born in good health and released to the mother, Dean's care. A few days later, CPS and the sheriff's office showed up at her doorstep and removed the child because of the older child's removal, and to keep the siblings together despite the pending reunification plan. Because the county incentivizes CPS to remove children before the age of 2, which is the adoptable age, the biological family alleges that the second son was removed for financial gain, and thusly, both children were placed with the West family for financial and personal gain, aka adoption. In 2018, Dean reported mistreatment within the West home and her children appearing scared and injured during visits with her. None of these concerns had been present in the first placement. However, according to Dean, the children had injuries, lost weight, and appeared frightened. When CPS did not take action, the grandmother petitioned to have the boys with her, and when that also received no response, the mother and grandmother wrote to local authorities for help. The authorities did not respond to that letter, and they took no action to protect the boys. Kern County failed to follow the 2018 Federal Family First Preservation Services Act, and because of this failure, both children are now deceased. In this case, the foster parents have pled not guilty to all charges, and their trial was set to start July of 2022, but it was pushed back to 2023. After all of that, they have been charged with a laundry list of offenses, including 2 counts of second-degree murder, willful cruelty to a child, and false reporting of an emergency. The indictment lists several aggravating factors that may shed light on the circumstances of these crimes. It alleges that the defendant induced a minor to commit or assist in the commission of the crime. In this note, it should be noted that the couple did have other children, biological and adopted, in their home who were older, so it is potentially possible that they had one of their older children helping them commit this crime. It is also noted that they threatened witnesses and carried out the crime in a manner that indicates planning, sophistication, and professionalism. Again, this would go back to potentially having their children involved in the crime and threatening them to keep quiet. The family's 4 other children, 2 of them who are also adopted, are now in protected custody. This means they may have witnessed the crimes or been there when it happened. It could also indicate that potentially they participated in the crime or were encouraged to participate in the crime and then kept quiet afterwards. Lawyers from the West did not immediately respond to a request for comment to USA Today. They have not commented to other news outlets either. I did check that. If convicted, the most serious charges, Trezell and Jacqueline West could face 30 years to life in prison. Their trial is set to begin on May 23rd of 2023. It is crucial to note that both of these parents are being held without bail and both have pled not guilty. The other children in the home, including the 2 other adopted children, are being held in protective custody and are safe right now. Given all of these facts and the facts that the older children are currently in protective custody, it stands to reason that these parents not only abused their adoptive sons, but also pulled their other children in on the abuse. It would be interesting to note who, if any, of the children are speaking up, because in my opinion, if the other adoptive children are speaking up, they may have been the targets of abuse as well. Whereas the biological children, as we see with an adoption, are often favored and may have participated or been forced to participate in the abuse in this case. Now, that is not to say that that is what happened. That is simply an interesting piece of information that I will absolutely be listening and looking forward to when this case does go to trial. However, that said, all of these charges are certainly still alleged, as none of them have been proven, and this case has not gone to trial yet. However, the fact remains that these 2 little boys are gone and no longer in this world. The fact also remains that these 2 parents decided to end their child's life. Another interesting fact is that their adoptive grandfather, spoke out and said he was so excited to have new members of his family, and that he had spent, a good amount of time with these children. However, on the current visit to him, he had noted that the 2 boys weren't there and asked about them. And the more questions he asked, the parents had given conflicting answers and the children had given conflicting answers. So given that, he started to raise the alarm. It is believed that that is the only reason that the parents ever reported these children missing. And it is also crucial to note that these parents did not report their children missing until 3 months after they had been allegedly murdered. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my account of the horrific story of classic Pettus and Cinsere Pettus, and I hope in this case, again, justice is served. However, this is an ongoing case, so stay tuned for when all of the court documents and all of the information regarding this trial does become public, because I'm going to be on it like white on rice, like right there, paying attention, because these little boys and their family do deserve justice, whether that is at a federal level or at a criminal level or both. Thank you so much for listening and being a part of this. Have a beautiful day, my lovelies.